All right. So now we venture forth to our speaker spark. We call it a spark because it brings a spark of light and wisdom and inspiration to the group. And we have our new friend, Deb DeWilde. And Deb, you can stand up. And Deb is a shamanic, a multidimensional healer. And she's going to share a little bit about her journey today. So let's give a warm circle welcome to Deb. Thank you. You're welcome.
I'm wondering if everybody, hi. It's been 10 years since I've been public speaking, so. My name is Deb, and I am a shaman, a multimodality healer, and a spiritual mentor. And before we start, I'm wondering if everyone can just close their eyes and take a deep breath in and release. Taking another deep breath in and release. One last time, this being a cleansing breath. So you're going to go in through your mouth and out through your mouth. So we inhale, and we release. Excellent. Thank you. Before I became a shaman or a healer or a mentor, I wasn't any of those things. And I had a life filled with pain, fear, and survival. I lived in flight or fight or freeze for the majority of my life. I want to share with you how I broke through those barriers, how I turned my life of trauma into one of healing and purpose. I wasn't born into peace. I was raised in an abusive environment. Violence, judgment, and fear were my constants. Whether it was at home, the neighbor's house, school, or church, it was always about fear. I was raised a Roman Catholic. I always say that I was bred and born because it just seemed like it was determined prior by the priest who married my family that I was going to be a Roman Catholic and that I was going to be of that divination and that I was going to be a Roman Catholic. And there were very clear expectations on who that was. And if I was to speak the truth, I would tell you that I had no idea that that the world wasn't all Roman Catholic because everything is so encompassing with that. And I was taught to fear God. I was taught to fear speaking up. I was taught to fear being seen. The message was loud and clear. If I play by the rules, I could have a husband, my 2.4 kids, become an executive secretary, be thin, and then maybe I would be worthy. Now, I am Canadian, so 2.4 kids comes from the expression that if you look at the medium of how many kids most people had in families, the average family had 2.4 children. So in case you're wondering where that number comes from. But it all came with conditions. I had to be thin, I had to be silent, and I wasn't allowed to be myself. My father came from privilege, a toxic cocktail of status, appearance, and buried abuse. My mother came from poverty, substance abuse, and violence, shaped her world. And between the two, I learned how to live in survival mode. I learned how to disappear. Disappearing kept me safe. Even in public, if I saw someone that I knew and I didn't want them to see me. I learned how to become invisible, how to raise a cloak of competence and just move into a different direction. And people would walk by me and not recognize it. It was beautiful. I have 2 invisible disabilities that alter the way I interact with the world. And the first is that I am deaf in one ear, which means that I cannot tease out background information from words I'm hearing. So if like we have now, the furnace is running and you all were talking, I couldn't make anything out. It would just be a big shh. And see, and with being deaf in one ear and not being able to tell where noises came from, I didn't always know when someone was talking to me. I was always raised to be on the right side of a person or the right side of the room. My spouse always and my daughter always walk on my left side so that I don't have to think about being deaf. I can just be. I don't have to look at my spouse. I can just look at the world and be present with everything and still hear her. However, people often think or have thought that I'm actually a snob because I don't, if they're over here for some reason, if I'm standing with my back and I'm not expecting Joe Blow to walk there and I'm meditating on this plant, which I am quite capable of doing. You know, I'm meditating on a plant, I'm being one with the plant, I'm doing all that, and someone's talking to me, I haven't heard a word, they get upset and they go. And they think, number one, I'm ignoring them, and number two, I'm a snob. You know, and because of my invisible disability, when I talk, I don't always know whether my voice is too high or too low. I don't always, or sometimes I enter a conversation, I jump on someone else's words, and I'm not trying to. It's just I also have single auditory process, so you can hear something, write it down, and get ready for your next thought. I can't do all that in process. So, but that's just the first invisible disability. I have a few. I also have a connective tissue disorder that leaves me physically unsteady. I had very lax joints, and my fingers bend back. So if I played volleyball, I couldn't strengthen my hands to accept the ball and punt it back. I would literally, the ball would snap my fingers back all the way. And I would be in pain. And of course, people thought I was just being a schmutz. But I wasn't. I literally felt the pain. And people, you know, because I don't always know, I walk methodically, I walk slowly, I'm always in my brain thinking, okay, can I walk on a surface and be safe? However, when I was young, that was considered to be lazy because I wasn't running and I wasn't moving as fast as the other kids. And it just kind of gave everyone this bizarre way of thinking about who Deb was, even though they didn't get to know me at all. We've been to places together, Bev and I, and they've actually approached Bev and said, why isn't she in such a mood? And I'm not. My face is just in a particular way because I'm concentrating on either I need to be a part of this conversation or I'm going to start dinner over here. But which is it, you know? And so I get this look on my face. So if you see it today, please know it's all good. So again, the terminology, lazy, aloof, snobbish, not thin, not okay. But I have this deep urge to protect other people. They're the ones that no one else stood up for. And so that led me to become a behavioral consultant and mental health clinician. It's what drove me to work in locked facilities, to work with teens who were living on the edge, who were suicidal, a harm to themselves or harm to others. And but as life often does, I had a hard curveball thrown at me while I was in my 3rd year of working with teens who were trying to die. And that was my father took his own life. Suicide in the 1980s was whispered about, if mentioned at all. I was taught to lie about it, to pretend it didn't happen, to swallow the shame. Before anyone said the words, I knew. I was initially lied to and told that he had died in a car accident, but I knew. My soul knew differently. And I vividly remember the time when Spirit, actually the moment that Spirit gave me a choice. I went up to my mom's room, I laid down on the bed, and I just was beside myself with grief. And I was about to vocalize and scream. And that's not something we do in my family. I was about to vocalize and scream, and I was laying flat on my back on the bed. And then all of a sudden, I felt this angelic entity enter my body slowly. It was like here, as I was laying down, and for every inch it went that way, I felt it inching into my body. And when my body became fully immersed with Spirit, and I was wide awake, I started seeing a tunnel, and I was in a tunnel, and I was running in this tunnel. And I thought, okay, and I'm running, and then I see the light, and I think to myself, that's interesting, but I still run to the light. But then I knew, I had this knowing, if I chose to get to the light, that I would die. And I knew it, and so I turned around and I ran back. And by the time I got back, I opened my eyes, and I knew that Spirit had given me a choice. I was given an exit point, and I chose to stay. I chose to come back. Now, that wasn't anything that I would have taken in school, right? We're taught to fear. You have to fear God, so that if we fear God, we'll do everything that's correct. And we will then be okay. And we will then go to heaven. And we will then be saved from hell. So this was my first conscious experience of Spirit giving me a choice, a moment of clarity. But having the moments of clarity doesn't mean that life stops testing you. I married an alcoholic, believing that being married, even badly, was better than being alone. I married the alcoholic because he didn't mind my size. That's exactly why I married him, because my size didn't mean anything to him, which was a blessing, because in the world that I was living in, I didn't fit in. So it was far better for me to be married than not to be married at all. I'd rather be divorced. According to, the projection that I was placed on, that was better. We had a beautiful daughter, and for her, a year later, I had the strength to leave. I was at my lowest point, and nothing mattered but her, nothing. And then I had been told something that was really, really life-changing. I saw this psychic on TV back in the day. We didn't have internet. I saw a TV. He lived in the next town, and I called in. He called in, and I got online with him, and he said something that made me feel like it was safe to go visit him. And he was simply in the next town, like a whole 20-minute drive. And so I went to him, and he said to me that I am not seeing the messages I'm not seeing the signs from the angels. And I took that, and I knew he was real because he was able to sit there and he looked like my father. He acted like my father. He took on my father's presence. You know, all of a sudden, you know, the guy's, you know, straightening up, and he's straightening up his pant leg as if he's wearing a three-piece suit, as my father always did. And so I knew that what he was saying was the truth. I absolutely understood that. And I guess I had been so busy surviving, I hadn't noticed the angels at that time. So the message kind of cracked something open within me. I started learning about angels, energy, and healing. It was the first time I began to trust and to let go of fear, even if only a few minutes. I would surround my daughter's father's car with Archangel Michael on all four corners, above and below, the road before, behind, and above. Every time. I had full custody, and he had tiny visits. And even in those tiny visits, I knew that she was at risk. So I just kept trying to keep her safe. And that's what I did. And that's how I learned to let go of fear for the first time in my life. And then I went and I heard about this person who does past life regression, and he came from a city pretty far away, and he was pretty innocuous. And what I mean by that is he wasn't the typical strong male. He had his long hair, he had his Native American boots on, and he was just dressed in kind of like cream, you know. And I lay on the massage table he's got going there, and he says he has to hold my hand so that he can see my energy. I accept that because he feels safe in that moment. And I had a few past lives, and the first one, I was an indigenous medicine woman in Philadelphia. And I also had my right leg was wrapped, and I was wearing a peasant skirt. And I do remember, because I have had varicose veins since I was in my early 20s, which was really unusual back then in the 80s. And so these veins have come through different generations, because I was the first one in my family to ever have them. And and then the second one, I was a Native American male, and I stood there. I was taller, I was thin, I was muscular. I felt the appropriate clothing, like the loincloth. You know, I felt the strength. I felt the beat of Mother Earth. You know, and it was all there. I could understand my thought processes, everything. And the second time I went and saw that gentleman, I walked up to him, got on the table, I was ready to go, and I said, "Take me home." And he looked at me shocked. He was absolutely shocked. He was absolutely stunned, and looked at me and smiled and said, "Okay." No one's ever asked him to take them home before. And so I knew this time I wasn't afraid. We went right to it, got there very quickly, and I was able to restore and reset. And that's all I asked him to do. Just take me home. Just let me feel something other than the worldly human part of me. And so with each light, with each vision, it all added to the puzzle pieces. But nothing prepares you for the betrayal of the deepest level. Years later, I married again. I thought I had finally created the perfect life. But the dream shattered when I discovered that my husband was a predator, targeting my daughter. In that moment, I did for her what I've never been able to do for myself. I kicked him out, I called the police, and I stood in my truth. Everything crumbled. I doubted my ability to trust, sense, to even breathe. I was broken. But something quiet inside me kept whispering to start small, to start where it feels safe. I was collecting feathers. I was watching the stars. I listened to the birds. I felt peace. I felt more at home with the birds and the animals than I did with people. I started attending powwows. The beat of the drum, the smell of the sage, the rhythm of the dancers felt like home to me. It's when I bought my first smudging fan. Such a blessing. I became a Reiki master. I began to create smudging fans on my own and was happy to do that. And in 2012, more grief came. My brother died suddenly of a heart event, and my mother died 13 days later of a broken heart. At 48, I was the last one left alive of my core family. The compound grief is unbearable. Again, I lost my spiritual abilities. My human pain was too heavy. It took me a long time to understand why I was the only one left here alone. It didn't matter all the abuse at that time. Like when you're in that level of grief, you're not thinking about, well, I'm safer without Dad's here. I don't have to deal with these issues without Dad and Dad. But the reality is, I learned that it was because of their death that I was free. I no longer carried their burdens, their grief, or their consequences of their behavior. I no longer had to measure up to what others thought I should be. This was my first conscious experience of spirit giving me a choice, a moment of clarity. But clarity doesn't mean life stops you. Sorry. Healing has a way of coming back around. I started to create fans again, offering Reiki, reconnecting with spirit. People started calling me a shaman. I didn't believe it yet, but the seeds had been planted. And in the middle of all of it, a hidden family truth revealed itself. I discovered that my grandmother was Mi'kmaq, or in true Mi'kmaq terms, Mi'kmaq, indigenous to Canada. Suddenly, everything made sense. The drum beat, the feathers, the pull towards the earth, it was in my blood. The turning point. And the other thing is, I really recently discovered that a lot of the foods we ate were also indigenous, but I was never told that. A lot of what? A lot of the foods that we ate at home was indigenous. I never knew that. It's not until I used today's technology, I'm joined to a few Mi'kmaq groups, and you see them, and you're Mi'kmaq if you eat this, you're Mi'kmaq if you eat that. And I'm like, excuse me? I've never seen anybody make the hamburger hash my mom makes, ever, until I saw it in the Mi'kmaq groups. Never. How about the level of bologna we eat? Like, there are just certain things, certain ways, but it was never spoken to us, And the only thing that I can figure is that Granny actually kept her indigenous world a secret, because back in the day, there still was the indigenous residential schools, and they took all the children away. So the truth is, I think that the family held a secret, and we are alive today because of that. So for me, my turning point wasn't exactly a single event. It was the accumulation of choosing to keep showing up over and over again. Every scar, every painful chapter, every moment of survival gave me the ability to walk beside others through the fire. To hold space without judgment, to offer guidance rooted in both professional knowledge and spiritual truth. I studied shamanism formally. but the real training came from life itself. I stopped apologizing for who I am. I embraced the healer, the observer, and the spiritual warrior within me. I no longer feared life. I no longer fear death. I trust the Creator. I walk barefoot, grounded, and knowing I belong here. Today, I walk in the light, grounded in who I am, and I have boundaries. Now I facilitate soul retrievals, inner child sessions, past life regressions, vision quests, all from a place of deep compassion and lived experience. I help others identify what is holding them back, raise it to be healed, heal it, and release it. I create one-of-a-kind custom smudging fans to which I channel each feather placement, each crystal placement, and each handle. It's about a 6 to 8 week process. It's then cleared, left, and birthed in a shamanic drawing ceremony under the moon. I also create one-of-a-kind walking sticks, and each with its own journey to share with you. Whatever barriers you face, whether stories you've been told about who you are or what you're worth, they are not the end of your story. I'm here to remind you, you have the power to choose. You have the power to reclaim yourself. It's okay to shed all of those societal and familial conditioning to discover who you are and why you're here. No matter how dark that tunnel feels, you can always turn back toward the light. I walk in the light today, and I walk beside others, and I show them how to do the same. Thank you.